regular legal committee meeting to order. This is Thursday, April 23rd, 2020. It's 4 p.m. Could we have a roll call, please? Here.
Here.
Who is that?
That may the Aragon.
Yeah, this is Larry with Ergon.
Okay, Larry. Is Drew also on?
I haven't heard anything from him yet, but I'm assuming he will be momentarily.
It looks like he's on, according to our system.
Could I have a motion to approve the agenda? I know I'd like to make a few changes. You ready?
Do you want me to make them? Or?
Yes, go ahead.
I make a motion that we approve the agenda as follows. Regular item 1 to be first, but then item number, let's see here.
Hey, Mark, this is Drew.
Okay, thanks, Drew.
Hey.
Hold on, we'll let you know when to start.
We're wanting to pull the air center stuff forward. I see what we've done here. So it would be regular item number 1, then item 6, then item 7, then items 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, and 9. So we're taking items 6 and 7 and placing them as items 2 and 3, and then everything else will fall in place is my motion.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second? All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda with those few changes of order. Any discussion? Hearing none, then all those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. The motion carries and the agenda is approved. We have the minutes from the February 28th airport, where are we, Legal Committee meeting. Can I have a motion on them, please? Okay. We have a motion to approve those minutes from the February 28th. I'd like to make just one little change, if I could, Amalia, and that is your last sentence after it's adjourned on page 5 of the packet, where it says Legal Committee for Thursday, February 27th was postponed due to a lack of quorum. I just wonder if you could move that sentence to right before notice of the, or after, I think, notice of the meeting was given. I think that when these are looked back on, they need to know early that that meeting was postponed. So that's the only thing I have. Is there anything else? Okay.
And I wasn't a member of the committee at that time, but I can certainly vote to approve, but I wasn't there at the time.
Okay, that's true, you weren't. So all those in favor of approving the minutes with that one small correction of moving that sentence to the front of the minutes, I'm sorry. All signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, motion carries. And yes, I should have earlier welcomed Councilor Perry as a new member or returning member, I guess, of this legal committee. So thank you. And it's Councilor Sanchez that is not on this committee this round, so we want to wish him well and thank him for his help on this committee. So appreciate that. Okay, we first have the activities from the Roswell Air Center. We have 2 renewals, I believe. Mark,
New leases.
Oh, they're okay. Sorry. Are you handling those?
Okay.
Please.
I'll go ahead and get started then. So the first lease is a new lease by J&A Recycling for a portion of Building 100, a 800 square foot portion out of the 5,700 square foot building. J&A Recycling is a local plastic recycling company, and they'll be in the southeast corner of Building 100. The rent is $300 per month, and their contract is for 1 year with a total of $3,600 for the year.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions of Mark on this new lease of J&A Recycling?
Madam Chair, I did have just a few.
Sure.
Usually our leases are for, they commence and they go several years and have provisions for extensions and stuff. This one is specifically a 1 year. What is the expectation that we're seeing from this?
Well, this one, they're growing their business. They're a fairly new business and working on a contract with the school district for their recycling program. Their eventual goal would be to move into the rest of that building as they grow their business. So we just put this one for 1 year at this point.
So remind me again, if you would, the rest of the building right now is vacant?
Correct. Its last use was storage with Cavu, and they vacated it about 6 months ago.
And is this portion of the building completely sealed from the rest of the facility?
Has its own entrance, and there is about a 4-foot space that goes into the other space, but it's easy to delineate between the two spaces.
So they won't have access to the rest of the facility?
We haven't blocked off the doorways, but they could have access. I mean, they could walk into it if they needed to, but we'll check in, make sure they haven't gone beyond what their lease parameters are. And if we did have a second tenant that occupied that space, then we would put up a physical barrier between the two spaces.
I just want to make sure, I just know from years past, when we have people that are taking certain portions of a building, and I don't know these folks at all, so I'm not trying to make any kind of accusation at all, but I do know that in the past, when we've had just particular areas of facilities, there can be a tendency of a usage of much more, and then you don't have the ability for renting really what it should be, or getting what the taxpayer should be getting for the facility at the time. So if we're able to keep watch on that, I guess I'd move forward with that.
Yeah, and in their operation, they really only required about half of that 800 square feet, so there should be no reason that they would expand beyond the 800 that they have. But that was,
are they currently located out at the base right now?
they're in town.
Okay, here in town, okay. Okay, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Can I get a motion then on J&A Recycling?
I make a motion that we present to full council on the consent agenda lease agreement with J&A Recycling on building number 100, consisting of 800 square foot, more or less, located at the Roswell Air Center. Term would be 1 year, commencing June 1 of this year, ending May 31st of 2021, in the amount of $3,600 and no cents, payable in 12 monthly installments, subject to all other terms and conditions of the lease.
Do I have a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second to recommend approval on the next consent agenda. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion carries then. That'll be on the consent agenda for May. Air sale?
Okay. AirSale of Florida Corporation, which is a large MRO operator at the Air Center, had the need to expand their storage space, and what this storage space is going to be used for is some of the parts that they currently have on our ramp area, so we're getting them to clear the ramp area to make room for more planes. So it's 1 acre that's already adjacent to an existing leasehold they have at Building 240. It'll be $250 a month or $3,000 annually, and the term is 5 years with CPI adjustments or 3%.
Okay. Any questions or comments about air sale?
Madam Chair, if I could just ask, what do we know what they're going to be looking to putting out there as far as storage?
It's miscellaneous aircraft parts. Specifically, I've seen engine cowlings is what they've moved out there so far, and similar parts like engine cowlings, bay doors, things like that.
Okay. Being in this facility, we don't have the map, so I can't see where it is on the, where is that this located exactly?
Let me see if it actually might show up in that airgun diagram. So
If you're
if you
familiar,
go
it's
to the
directly west of Building 240.
Say it one more time.
If you're familiar, it's directly west of Building 240, which was the old candy factory.
Okay, it is, okay. The old candy factory, okay. Okay. Well, thank you. Okay, Madam Chair.
Yes,
No, I'm done.
you're okay? Anything else, Counselor Peters? Is it your birthday today? Maybe? No, we won't sing. Thank you very much.
I will agree, Judy does not need to sing. I agree. Okay, okay.
I don't. Happy birthday. Yeah, our present to you is that we will not sing. Okay. Any other questions then about air sale? If not, could I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we present to full council on the consent agenda, new land lease agreement with AirSale Incorporated for the vacant land west of building number 240, consisting of 1 acre of vacant land, more or less, located at the Roswell Air Center. The term will be a 5-year, commencing on June 1st of 2020, ending May 31st of 2025, in the amount of $3,000 and no cents per year, payable in 12 monthly installments of $250 in the first year of the lease, and then rent adjustment will be annually by CPI or 3%, whichever is greater, subject to all of the terms and conditions of the lease.
Do I have a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second to recommend approval of the lease with air sale, put on the consent agenda for May 14th, I believe. Any further discussion? Hearing none, then all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries, and that will be on the consent agenda. I'm going to just take privilege here for just 1 second. Counselor Perry just mentioned, and I've often thought, it would be handy if we had a map. And I don't mean, but if we just had a decent-sized map of
We used to
the
keep
Air
one in,
Center. We used to.
Sure.
It would help. I know you've got the exhibit in here, but it would help, like you're saying, in reference to where things actually are. So if
Sure, we can
you could
bring those.
Yeah, I don't want you to have to unroll, whatever, but just something where we could get that. And then the other thing, I thought we had discussed, since these are boilerplate agreements, that we would probably only need in our packet the first page and the exhibit. Is there a reason why that's all included here? What's that? Okay. Okay. Okay, so if we could, I just don't think we need that. We've approved that portion of these leases, and they're pretty much boilerplate, so would appreciate it. Cut down on the trees, too, as well.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. And
the
I'll go
next-
ahead and stay up here. Our presenters are on
Go
the
ahead.
line. Is Drew and Larry still on?
Yes, this is Larry.
And is Drew on?
Yeah, this is Drew. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear. So
Okay, perfect.
the gentlemen we have on the line are representatives from Airgon, which is a customer out at the Air Center that bought the improvements to Western Emulsion, and they're the current leaseholder of that land, and that lease is currently good and through 28. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves and their company and what we have in mind for the deal.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Okay. All right, I'll just start out, you're probably going to control most of the conversation here, but I'll just introduce myself as Oregon Representative Larry Erickson. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing for the southwestern and northwestern regions of the country. And I gave the presentation earlier this morning for the airport group, but I'm going to give Drew the privilege of doing this one if he needs to. You can take it over from there, Drew.
Okay. Thank you, Larry. Appreciate that. So, Drew Brooks, I'm with Ergon in Jackson, Mississippi, out of our corporate headquarters, Senior Vice President over our business development group, and privileged to be here today. So thank you guys for having us. Trying to get here where I can see. There we go. Okay, I got it now. Just make sure I can see the room. So I got it now. So if you want to flip to slide 2, kind of walk you through a little bit about who Ergon is. So a privately owned company, as I said, based in Jackson, Mississippi, diversified company that is based mainly in the oil and gas industries. We operate under 6 different business segments: refining and marketing. We have 2 refineries, one in Mississippi and one in West Virginia, and asphalt emulsions, which we represent. We'll talk a little bit about here in a second. And our midstream and logistics group, specialty chemicals, oil and gas, and construction and real estate. So Larry and I both represent Ergon Asphalt and Emulsions, and we have 60 locations now between the United States and Mexico. We have a recent acquisition amid all the stuff we're going through with COVID. We're still able to close it at the beginning of this month up in the Northwest. So that's our newest addition. But we appreciate you guys having us here and giving us an opportunity to tell you a little bit about who we are. So, if you can go to the next slide. So this will kind of give you an idea of where our locations are from an asphalt and emulsion standpoint. You can see we're spread out across the U.S., again, based out of Jackson, Mississippi. We've got some different business segments that we operate under. Ergon Asphalt and Emulsions is the road construction, so we sell paving and emulsion products to contractors, cities, agencies, states, so forth. Craftco is a business that we acquired back in the early 90s, based out of Phoenix, Arizona. And then our Blue Knight is an MLP that we own the general partner of. They're a midstream company. They lease asphalt locations across the U.S. A lot of those we actually lease from them. And then a couple of years ago, we acquired a business down in Mexico with about 17 locations there spread out, doing the same thing that Ergon Asphalt and Emulsions does. So, largest asphalt and emulsion marketer in the Americas, the resource in the asphalt industry, and we like to say we did pavement preservation. We're a pioneer in that. We did it when it wasn't cool. It's cool now, but it used to not be, and we've been doing it for a long time. So, can jump to the next slide. And any questions you guys have, y'all can stop me and we can walk through them. So, a little bit about Roswell. So, purchased this terminal, as Mark mentioned, from Western Emulsions in 2016. They leased this ground and built it as a greenfield site in 2008, 2009. And so we produce a variety of emulsion products that are used in road construction. So we're not the contractor. We're the guys who sell the liquid to the contractor to install the product to the ground. So we currently lease the land there, and you can see the the block there, about 13 acres. And the term, as Mark mentioned, goes through 2028. Currently, we have 6 employees right now. We've got one open position that we had a person leave, and we're backfilling. So a total headcount of 7 there in the community. All right, can you go to the next slide? So, we had reached out not long after we bought this in 2016 and started the process of looking at purchasing this land. And, ultimately our desire in purchasing the land, as we talk about here in a few slides, really goes to growth possibilities that we're looking forward to. And ultimately, to get our board comfortable with those, they want us to have that land owned as opposed to under a lease, and the possibility of for future investment. So we began working with the city, and they put us in touch with an appraiser who they've used before, and Mark has used before. And they came out and appraised the property as is, sitting there, and the appraisal came back at $340,000. So our offer to purchase the land is the appraised value of $340,000. Current value of the future lease payments is roughly $115,000. So as you can see, is a good increase over what the current value of those lease payments are in the future. As I mentioned, about 13 acres of property there. We would look for, once we can get approval, to have a 30-day due diligence period, mainly to obtain a title insurance commitment. We've been operating on this land for a few years, did our due diligence before we bought it, so really all we need is to get a title insurance commitment on that. This property is serviced by rail, so we ship our product in on rail cars, really from all over the country, mainly in the northern United States and Canada, and up in the Rockies. That rail line, the city does own that, and so currently the city is paying for the cost of that maintenance of that rail line, and what we have offered is to reimburse the city actual costs of that maintenance not to exceed $20,000 a year. And so in working with Mark and the group, felt pretty comfortable that's about what you're spending, maybe a little bit more than what you're spending today. So in essence, trying to reimburse you guys for that total. One of the things that we mentioned as well, though, is that in the event in the future that you get additional users of that rail line, we would be looking to get a cost sharing with those tenants for these maintenance costs. Today, we're the only company utilizing that line, and so we're comfortable paying for all of that. And then in addition, the city will reserve an easement for the location, maintenance, and operation of the rail line. So we'll look here in a second. We'll show you a little bit of where that rail line, the main line, passes through. So you guys would reserve an easement for that. Okay, next slide. So Railroad Avenue, we have been in works with you all probably about a year ago, and you'll see it here in a second. It's a while. I'll kind of walk it through on the map, but where the switch is, to switch to our spur, it's north of Railroad Avenue, and our property is south of Railroad Avenue. And so in order for us to switch cars in, we have to call in the BNSF to do that, and there's fees associated with doing that every time they're called in to do that. And so there's a lot of unused track just north of there. There's a side track that we wanted to utilize. We don't have a whole lot of storage at this location, and so a lot of times today we're using our rail cars as moving storage. And so what we work with you guys on is basically shutting off access right there where Railroad Avenue, the crossing, so that the BNSF would allow us to get a shuttle buggy in there and move our own rail cars. In working with you guys on that, basically what we've agreed to do is, at our cost, we'll make some additional infrastructure improvements. Let's just go to the next slide. It'll be easier to look at it. So you can see here our plant's kind of right down at the bottom, and you can see as those red lines and the X's start, that's where the crossing is. And so in essence, we would come in, you guys have blockaded the road just on the west side of the railroad crossing, and we would come in and tear up the road and demolish the road, Railroad Avenue, all the way up until you get to that blue line, which would be a new road that we would construct to create access from East Earl Cummings to the shred company right there. And so in visiting with Mark and the team on this, and working with Lewis Ahar, the city engineer as well, we determined that ultimately, in order to get rid of that crossing, it would be best from a city perspective, they said, to demolish all of this. So in addition to that, we will have a cul-de-sac just on the other side of the shred company, right at the top of Jennifer Lane, and then we will demolish the road southeast Wells all the way up to Hobson Road. And so basically you'll just have this new access road straight to the shredding company with a cul-de-sac for traffic to turn around and come out. So, we've run some estimates with a local contractor on what it's going to cost to do that, and we're committing to the city to do that project at our cost if we can move forward with this. And so we think the project will take about 3 weeks to complete, and so we feel like we're ready to commit to a month after we can get a final deal on the land, that we should be able to have the project complete. So that's our estimates on that. All right, on the next slide. So as we talk about value proposition, we, as I mentioned before, we're wanting to increase our ability to not utilize the rail cars as moving storage. And so what we will be looking to do is to come in and build some infrastructure there to build a new 30,000 barrel tank. And you can see from a size perspective, that blue dot on the screen, you can see our other tanks, which are small emulsion product tanks. It's a much larger tank. It's not going to be any taller or anything. It's just a wider tank. And so we would come in and install that just to the west of our rail spur, just to the east of the main rail line that's going through the property. And then we would install also the associated piping and everything to get product from there over to our plant. And so that investment is estimated at roughly about $2 million. The main thing in this for the city is that additional investment obviously brings property tax revenue to the city. From a staffing, employment standpoint, we're not talking about a lot. We'll have some increased volumes that we believe we can capture with bringing in this material in bulk like this. And so, we feel like in time we'll have 1 to 2 potentially new employees there with this project. But the biggest is ultimately the additional investment. And so, you can see there, obviously there's still a lot of green space there to further invest, and our intentions are to do that in time. This is the first project that we've got on the books that we're looking at, and we'll continue to look at additional projects as those things come to fruition, as we grow that market there around the Roswell area. So in addition, kind of as a somewhat as a good neighbor thing, we're proposing to install on the north line and the west property lines. You see those green lines there, a landscaping barrier between the residents and the terminal. And so we didn't really want to do a fence or something that in time will rust or could be graffiti painted or something like that. And so we're looking at investing about $60,000, plant cedar trees, 125 to 150 trees. Those initially, I'm being told, are about 7 feet tall, what we've got in the budget. And then all the, it'll be mulched and irrigated and so forth. So, we're planning to invest those additional funds as well as part of this project. So, that is our presentation. So, any questions you guys have, would be love to ask them. And again, we just really appreciate you guys allowing us to be here today virtually. This is a little weird for us not being there with you, but to understand the times we're in. So we just appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go ahead and open to questions then from the committee.
I can't hear.
Oh, is there an ordinance in there?
Is there an ordinance in this somewhere?
Aaron?
So what we've received right now is just the offer letter from Aragon putting these terms together. After this presentation, the next step would be to draft the ordinance, which would have to be based on a real estate agreement. And then the ordinance then would go to presumably this council and then this committee and then to full city council.
So what's the action tonight?
Tonight it's just the presentation.
Just a presentation.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
So we'd give you the opportunity to formulate your questions, and in between now and our next meeting, if there's anything you have, and obviously if you have something right now, we'd want to take care of that while we have them on the phone.
Well, my concern is closing that railroad crossing. They tried to close it last year, I believe. And we can't, you're going to eliminate all those people that live in that area and travel there. They did a traffic count on it, and it's pretty high. So unless they put another road on East Hyman over to Hobson, which I would be in favor of that. But as it is, losing this road, hundreds of people use that every day. And if you block that road off, people have to go all the way to Main Street to get on to Hobson, or they have to go down all the way down over to Job Corps and then go down to Earl Cummings Loop and then take Earl Cummings Loop all the way back up because there's no crossing. And I'm not in favor of this. I'm not in favor of selling this city property. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I have some questions. Without looking at this on a more zoomed out, but I am very familiar with the community there. It looks to me that those that would regularly use railroad could make their way down G Street, then to Martin, then straight over to Earl Cummings, or am I not reading that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's just a matter of just maybe 2 city blocks coming across to get to where they would need to be more. Okay. I guess my questions lean more to just, number one, I'm just seeing this today. It wasn't in our packet. I came to the airport commission meeting so I could get better understanding on maybe what was happening here. When we're talking about the sale of the property, we are talking about just the square of land that we see in the exhibit that was given to us on the page that just gives the square. Is that correct?
Correct. Wells making the northern border, G Street the western, Martin the southern, and
I
then
would like to see, when this comes back to the committee, a specific identified plat.
in the document, the appraisal report that's right there, all that's
Where's it
documented.
at?
That's that large document. I think it's,
It's not anywhere in this.
The 109 page.
oh, it's in the one that,
You've got, okay. Okay, I've not got to see
Right?
that yet.
yes.
Okay.
And if you want to distribute that electronically, I didn't have Jason's email address.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to be able to see that. Also, what was, I guess, some other things I want to know about the property. I was familiar with Western Emulsions, but of course, I've not been here forever. What was there before Western Emulsions? And how long were they there? Just complete vacant land?
I do remember, not specifics, but they created, it seems to me the rail line was there, and then they brought in the tanks. And I'm going to think that was probably around 2008 or something.
Yeah, it was, I believe, 2009. Drew mentioned that earlier.
Okay.
And I do believe the land was vacant. It's been a long time, but I drove past it a lot because I've been
Yes, it
working out there a
was.
long time. And there were 2 old tanks that were left there from the Air Force Base that were tall.
That's right.
And they may have gotten incorporated into that facility, but I don't believe anybody leased it before Western Emulsions did.
I'm just trying to find out what we had invested into the land before Western Emulsions came in on a land lease and started investing on the land.
I don't think we invested anything.
Okay. So infrastructure, everything that they have there is something they have.
Yes.
They have done their
Yes.
own investing on. Okay. And do we know what kind of estimated property tax income there would be to the city yet?
If you look at the value, I talked to one of the people the assessors about this, and they said about 1% of the value of the property. And if we're looking at the existing infrastructure that's there, so they already pay taxes on their improvements that they currently have. So they do pay taxes on that. They don't pay taxes on the land value. So the land value at $340,000 would be about $34,000 in property taxes. Or I'm sorry, $3,400 additional property tax.
I was going to
Yeah,
say.
no, $3,400.
I don't want to buy anything out there.
No, so $3,400 in additional property taxes, but then if you look at this investment that they're looking at, this would pave the way for that investment of an additional $2 million of improvements. So that would, make the facility, close to 3.5 as far as the value, million.
Next question is, does that spur, it looks like, does that spur cross Martin as well, East Martin?
It could. It hasn't in a long time.
Okay, that was my question. I didn't think it had for a long time, but I just wanted to, it's paved over. Okay. All right, so pretty much that's the end of the line anyway there. Has there been any discussions on the closure of the road to allow for the access to come back and forth without the sale of the property? Is that what have any of those discussions looked like?
That portion is important to them because it gives them the ability of moving material back and forth across it. So it's pretty much part of the deal.
I guess for me, I just need to see where those land boundaries are so that I can better understand that.
It's 3 different plats within that square. So, yeah, if you have an opportunity, you can review the appraisal report, and it draws it all out. But it's basically where you see the green line, and then just continue that over to their fence line and back down Martin and meet back up over at Martin and G Street.
Okay.
So it's pretty much a square.
And if you could just help me to better understand which the least amount of streets that we have to continue to take care of. Hyman, in favor of, if it's not a massive safety issue for the public. But what is the great benefit of the portion up near East Hobson Road, that portion of Southeast Wells there? What is the great benefit of it being cut off, shut down as well? And maybe I've not seen that because I can't see up front really well on this. Yes, sir.
I think the idea there is that the wells north of Shredboss cuts the property between Earl Cummings and the railroad into smaller pieces, and so really you wind up being able to put bigger buildings and more industry in those areas without the road. There's been the discussion that the intersection of Wells and Hobson is very close to the railroad tracks, so it's legally not a safety hazard, but it's very close. So that eliminates a safety hazard with that intersection literally being right next to the crossing of Hobson on the railroad tracks. And it makes a better traffic flow, puts people onto Earl Cummings instead of coming down that, and like you said, one less to maintain.
Yeah, the least amount of streets we can I'm all for vacating streets if it's not for safety issue, if it's not creating a safety issue for our citizens, for sure.
Right.
So, Madam Chair, really what we are looking at is just getting an informational on this. We're not looking at making any kind of recommendations right now, correct?
Yes, Counselor, that's what the intent is.
Okay, I yield.
Mr. Nebb is in the room. I wondered if he may have a comment on this, or... Oh, okay. Thank you.
No, not much to add to this. I think everybody's done a really good job of trying to explain exactly where we're at with this. If we can go back a couple slides, Amalia, to I think the one where the street is being taken out, the red and the red lines. All right, right there. This is probably the best example, as the closest we can get with the map right now. But and Wells Street is still closed today at this point in time, pending this conversation. So we've kept the intersection closed at that since we got the work done earlier. I would say that the neighborhood has started to go down south, down to Earl Cummings, and then over to Earl Cummings. And so we're using Earl Cummings for that. But just to reiterate some of the other stuff is that the removal of Wells Road will allow us to subdivide those parcels up there in a more efficient manner, all the rest of our property. Wells is actually not identified as a street right now, so it is not platted out as a road either. It crosses the property.
We're talking about Southeast Wells?
Yeah. The section in red, once you get up there so far, I don't believe it's platted out. If I remember the map right, it crosses the property. So it's just it's an access point or an easement essentially for a road, not a real true right of way. But the whole idea, and I think going back to the safety things, was to eliminate the intersection of Wells and Hobson Road, because if we're successful in increasing the traffic on the spur and have more rail traffic out there for economic benefit, then there will be more things crossing Hobson as well too. And then of course all of this stuff that we're talking about on the budget-wise is that we want property tax paying people on either side of the street that can help contribute to the use of the street. Streets that don't have any properties on both sides are more expensive to maintain. And so I think those are the pieces. Aragon has done a very nice job of working with us. They have agreed to everything that we have asked for. And so it's whether or not we have missed something within this agreement. I think that the appraisals can be done in a lot of different ways, but we had worked through all of that, and I think that their desire to not have the city carry any of the costs for this change should be appreciated for that purpose. And so I won't add anything else to it, but I know that it'll help us replat those properties up there for other use. And I know we had a long conversation because it's within the air, within the base property. So we do look at whether or not we want to sell the property or do land leases. And in this case, it made the most sense to do the sell rather than to just do a long-term lease on that property, because the value of that property tax coming back to the air center. That's all I have to add unless there's any questions.
Thank you. Yes, Councilor Peterson.
We looked at that,
What was the question? I'm sorry.
Where I'm in dead ends towards the railroad, why can't we go from there up to Hobson? And then you can eliminate all
allow
that.
the neighborhood to access up
Right.
on the northern part. The challenge we have is that right on the backside of those privately owned properties, the area on the left side of the tracks up at the top of that map is a detention area. And so that is serving as the detention. And talking with Louis Nahar, our engineer, we get concerned anytime we're crossing any of our detention spaces. But it could, the farther away from Aragon it can help. The challenge became is that saving any part of that street and not being able to use the property on either side was problematic for us as we looked at that.
Well, I don't have no problem, eliminating the street, but we have to get these people somewhere. If you put the road right behind those people's houses and go straight north with it,
Right.
there's no drain right there.
Right.
The further you get to the railroad, yes, there is a
Right.
drain.
And as we look at this, it became I guess that crossing became an easy way to come out of the neighborhood. But I believe that as we looked at it for emergency purposes. And of course, most of that area is served by the fire station south of there. And so they will come right up in that stretch. And so I think that the neighborhood has actually found a way to respond to that street closure and not use that as the cut through. I mean, if you go out there, you're going to see dirt pathways where some individuals just like to drive across the dirt. But I think most of that neighborhood has found different methods because they can go south, they can get over to Earl Cummings. Earl Cummings is a very well-maintained street to allow them through that. They can get up on the Hobson, over by Maine. I think that's where you had mentioned as well.
And, I used to live out there, and it's, when school's in session, all the buses out there, it's a pain. In the mornings, afternoon, it's a pain. All the buses in those streets are smaller streets. So you're forcing all the traffic over to Main Street is what you're doing.
Or going south.
Well,
I mean, and that's the thing, is eventually everybody's going north like the schools and everything,
and
or
to
west.
go south, you have to go way out of your way south
Right.
by Job Corps. You have to take that street.
But that was our reasoning and
Okay.
what we've done, so.
And also, I believe there was a dry cleaners on that property, on the Air Force Base. Is this
Yeah,
property contaminated?
there was more than one contributor. I think that's where you were going with the dry cleaner and
Is this property contaminated?
again, I think that's what Aragon will be doing their due diligence on the environmental conditions of that property as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I think this is primarily just a discussion item.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, this is a fairly large
Yes.
project to undertake, so we wanted to make sure that we gave you guys a month's leadway to your decision to move it forward to full council.
Okay.
Anything else on that? We do have the actual offer letter that they sent us.
Yes.
Most of the points were within the presentation. Do each of you have a copy of that with the letterhead of Aragon Asphalt and Emulsions?
Yes.
Okay. Would you like me to read it aloud, or you're all right taking it with you?
I bet we can read it. Thank you very
Okay.
much. Okay, so again, informational item. We need to look at this information and ask staff of any questions or concerns we may have. And I don't like it just hanging out there. I don't quite understand what the next step is. Is there one?
Do you mean in terms of this meeting or in terms of what will happen going forward?
With Ergon's proposal, I guess.
So the next suggestion, and I mean, my recommendation to Mr. Patterson will be to have Aragon draft the real estate agreement. So it'll have to go through revisions of the real estate agreement. Probably going to be a couple of attendant agreements because everything in the proposal won't be encapsulated in one document that gets filed with the county. After that, it'll come in the form of a draft ordinance for the city council to vote on.
Okay. So we're looking at a few months down the road.
Given the amount of the terms that we have, we're hoping that it could be as early as next month. But
Okay.
time will
All right.
tell.
Okay. So, gentlemen, we appreciate your presentation and you phoning in so we could hear from you directly. Do you have any other further comments?
I do not. Just thank y'all for the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's dinner time where you
Have a
are.
great evening.
Thank you. Okay. So again, we should see this on the next month's council or committee agenda for
With the
some
ordinance.
further. Okay. Thank you. Any? Okay.
Scott's going to do the
Thank you
next one.
very much. We have one more item under the airport, which is the scope of services for the engineering consultant. Scott, I believe we have a copy of that in our packet.
Page 28.
28, thank you.
For once, I actually looked. So this document is the draft scope of work for the RFP for our airport engineering consultants. We do this every 4 years, go out to bid for our consultants. Currently, we have Armstrong Consultants as our company. This will obviously open it back up. We're looking at the scope of work. I don't believe, no, the whole RFP is not here, just the scope of work. So I'll start with, hopefully you guys have looked at it and know what your questions are, and I'll just leave it at that rather than digging into things we don't want to talk about.
Okay.
I don't want to waste your time.
Okay, as you said, this is only the scope of work. We have pretty much a boilerplate RFP that this is inserted into, so this is specific
Correct.
to engineer services at the Roswell Air Center. So typically, does this go to full council? Or is it, I don't.
These are placed on the consent agenda typically.
Okay, so council, yes. So council, this will go to council with our recommendation, and it'll be placed on the consent agenda. So are there any questions or comments regarding this scope of work? This is RFP 20-007,
And I can tell you that this is tightly regulated by the FAA. The scope of work comes straight out of an advisory circular. So it's tailored to us a little bit, but in general, the format of it, all of what I have in the scope of work is out of that advisory circular. So it's boilerplate from there as well.
okay. Is this any different from what, from the scope of work 4 years ago?
It is slightly different because the AC changed, and mostly that is in format and terms used to describe things. It really is no different in the type of work that the consultants would do.
Okay. So I guess my question is, was anything crossed off the list from 4 years ago, or is this
No.
all ongoing?
No, it's all ongoing.
Okay.
Well, I mean, you're talking about projects, or you're talking about, if we're talking about projects, yes, obviously a number
Well,
were, because we're going to do something every year. And
But
in terms of what they do for those projects.
getting to the projects,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, that's what I mean, the elements of the projects.
That's
So,
all
so
still-
no, those are the same.
Okay.
They, like I said, they've been rearranged a little bit, and the terms are a little bit different.
Okay,
But no, the projects are the only things that have really changed.
great. Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions, comments? Okay. Can we have a motion regarding the scope of work for RFP 20-007?
I make a motion that we send to full council on the consent agenda for the approval of RFP -20-007, which is the engineering services, scope of services for the Roswell Air Center as presented.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to include this scope of work on the consent agenda for the May council meeting. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no? Okay, that will be on the consent agenda. We're now going to the ordinance on the Air Center, which is page 179 of our packet. This was rearranged. Mr. Holman.
Thank you, members of the committee. What we have here, I think that prior to Councilor Perry joining us, we had given the presentation about the plan for rewriting the aviation chapter 5 of the ordinance. This is the airport. This comes from the Airport Advisory Commission, who has been looking at this. They are the ones who asked that this be forwarded to legal committee for review right now. The plan would be that once all the components for the complete revision are included, that they will all come as a packet for consideration and actual approval. So I apologize to add another item that is primarily discussion at this point. As you'll remember, there were 80 sections in the original Chapter 5 Aviation of the Roswell City Code. A lot of that information was duplicative, or it either adopted FAA standards, and in some cases, old standards that aren't applicable anymore, or it put into ordinance items that are more appropriate in other documents. So you'll notice that this ordinance, what it does is it splits everything moves it away from one giant ordinance that puts everything together, excuse me, into a much more consolidated document. So the first ordinance is what would actually replace Chapter 5 in the ordinance, in the actual ordinance itself. The second that you have is the zoning code changes, and this I had assistance from Mr. Morris. There were some provisions in the aviation code that discussed restrictions on building or removing obstructions, and these are things that are traditionally handled by the zoning department, especially when you're talking about before an item becomes an issue, looking at plans, being able to address those proactively, or they have the enforcement mechanism also to, if there are any problems later. What this does is it, number one, let's see, first thing it does is it reincorporates those definition sections into the larger zoning definition area. Then it defines airport hazards. So these are hazards specific to airports, which are height. The other thing, which was, I appreciated Mr. Morris's contribution looking at other hazards that could constitute, would be lights, lasers, that kinds of things. As we explained this morning, this provision kind of overlaps with the FAA's enforcement regulations of the area surrounding an airport, so that we do have, it gives the city some power to have regulation or say so on as to surrounding properties, but as to county property, perhaps we might have to rely on FAA enforcement of some of these rules. The other, forgive me for jumping back and forth, once going back to the other ordinance, the two components that we are missing are policies. Number one, the minimum standards for commercial activities. That is a, I don't want to say boilerplate, it's a requirement from the FAA that we have those standards. They had previously been in an ordinance. The plan is to move those into a policy. The idea being that those change, and when they change from the FAA, we then have the flexibility to address those changes. Those tend to be industry standard items. The other document would be the rules and regulations for the Air Center, talking about establishing security protocols, establishing concessionaire fees was one of them, regulating more of the access and the business of the Air Center itself. Again, whenever that was talking about a more kind of granular approach to the activities that were going on, we felt that was more appropriate to be in a policy. So you can see that it has gone from 80 separate sections to a much smaller, more condensed version. We anticipate that this with the zoning codes have first go for review at Planning and Zoning. The Airport Advisory Commission has asked that those go to Planning and Zoning for this next meeting. So we have for the upcoming, whether it's May or June, I can't remember the timeline, we would then have all of the appropriate documents in order to take action on everything that constitutes the revision to this ordinance itself, including the two ordinances, the zoning code changes, and then the amendment to the aviation chapter 5, and then the policies that we would have that have been pulled out of that. That's what I have to present on that. I would stand for any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Bill, do you want to say something too, and then we can break these up, or do you have a comment at this point?
Thank you, ma'am. I would just be more interested in, answering any questions, any
Okay.
concerns. I think it's pretty straightforward stuff in here.
All right. Okay, thank you both. Let's go ahead then and look specifically at the first ordinance, which is amending Chapter 5. And if I'm not mistaken, it looks like the packet has a red line copy and then basically a clean copy with a few things highlighted that were changed, I believe, since the commission meeting. So
Right.
That's what you have. Let me just sort of start this off. And I know I'm old school. I know I'm very old school. But I notice that the lack of capitalizing a lot of words in this, and I'm assuming that that's the way to go. I'm just curious.
It can be a drafting preference depending on how you choose to do it. My impression from the Airport Advisory Commission is they do not like the capitalizing, so I was trying to stay away from it in this iteration.
Okay. There isn't continuity, though. Some places it is. Airport, for example, is the one I'm looking at, is capitalized and then it isn't. So I don't have the answer to that, other than I think there should be continuity in
Okay.
whichever we use. For example, in the first whereas, which I know doesn't become a part of the actual ordinance, but it's capitalized, and then you get into the redlined area and it's not capitalized. And then director, I think the same way, but a question, Aaron, in section 3 under director, there are 2 places where or 3 places where it refers to municipal airport. And I thought we were going to take out the municipal because the reference is that Roswell Air Center is referred to as airport.
I think that's a good catch, yes, that should
Okay.
just be airport.
So it's those 3 in, like I say, the section 5
Where are you
of.
looking at?
I'm looking at section 3, the bottom part of the page, and then under section 3, it says section 5, director. And if you'll notice, at the end of
Oh,
the
I see
first
now.
line and in the second and in the third, it refers to municipal airport. We're going to
I see.
delete the word municipal.
And then in that circumstance, to go back to your previous point, it should be capital A airport there.
It should be.
Yes, if
I-
the goal is consistency, then yes, we should make sure that that is consistent.
Seems to me when you're referring to the airport, it should be capitalized. If we're saying an airport, then it's not.
Right.
But again, remember my reference. I don't-
Right.
Okay. Again, in some other places, well, it's capitalized, okay. Does the committee have any questions or comments about this first portion, which is the amendment to Chapter 5? No? Councilor Perry?
So, this would be, we're sending to full council for advertisement, or?
Yes.
But the commission
No.
has asked that this not go forward now, only be considered as a discussion item. But you are not bound by the commission.
What was the, Madam Chair, if I may?
Certainly, go ahead.
What was the reasoning for a desire not to vote, put this forth for advertisement?
The way I understood it is that we wanted all of the changes to be presented at once. But now that I'm thinking about it, I guess one of the possibilities could be to move the ordinance forward and then wait for the time for advertisement. And then once it's been advertised, hold the hearing and then talk about the policies. The one kind of kink in all of this is that the zoning code needs to go to P&Z first, so the zoning would not be appropriate to move forward yet.
Let me ask procedural question then. If planning and zoning gets it, it still has to come to council to be approved.
And in fact, it actually is supposed to come back to legal first.
And that was my question. So then it first has to come to legal.
Right.
Can planning and zoning get this for their next meeting? I'm not sure what the date is, Bill.
Yes, it would be at the end of May, and we have plenty of time for advertising.
I believe that planning and zoning is usually 2 days before legal committee. Is that right, Bill?
Yeah.
Is it the
roughly.
fourth
And that-
Tuesday?
Sometimes it's the same week, sometimes
Okay.
it's not. But close enough. We can get it to planning and zoning in May. We could schedule it for legal if it's after, just to make it, you know.
Also
Yeah,
in May?
we could do that, at least incorporate it, and if it goes, it goes. If not, then we'll just pull it from the agenda.
Okay, so then it could go to full council in April to be advertised, or a May, no, I'm sorry, June, I'm going
June.
backwards instead of forwards. May to June to actually be, have a public hearing on both of them in July.
July, correct.
Is that right? Does that sound doable to those? Bill?
It'd be June to advertise, and then July to.
Yes.
For adoption.
Okay. So let's kind of aim at that time frame. So right now, I think specifically, we're looking at, again, the ordinance amending Chapter 5. And I guess I'd like to clear it, so let's have a motion on it. And then when we get to the zoning code stuff, we could discuss it, but we'll wait.
So start again, you do want a motion on this portion?
Yes, I mean, I would like to, so we don't have, I don't think unless there's a need by anyone to revisit it. But we would hold off on actually advertising it in the at the June council meeting, not
So then what would the motion be?
to recommend approval for advertising at the June council meeting.
Right. Yes, I think that's right.
Is that right?
And we're
So
comfortable
that this, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just gonna say, are we comfortable that the commission will be done with their work and P and Z done with their work and everything?
Oh, good question.
I think so on this, yes, sir. I would think this one would be easy for one time.
Okay.
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 Can I get a motion then, please?
I make a motion that we send to full council in the regular June meeting of the full city council, recommendation for advertisement of ordinance number 20 dash, the rest will be given later, which is an ordinance amending Chapter 5 of the Roswell City Code relating to aviation.
Okay, do I have a second? We have a motion and a second then to send the ordinance amending Chapter 5 to full council with a recommendation to advertise to advertise in July. So this would go to the June council meeting. Did I get that right? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, great. That motion carries. Now we have the revised zoning code on airport hazards. So basically, at this point, we're probably just making ourselves aware of it and what it is and how we got there, and we'll wait for the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation after their May meeting. Any questions or comments? This is stupid. I've got a blank page in here, so I don't know if I have the full ordinance proposed ordinance.
Is it 2 pages, the actual ordinance?
It should be
Is it just-
pages 187, 188, and 189. So the final page should just be section 3 and the signatures.
Okay, so mine does go from 188 to 189, but I have a blank page in between, so there must have
Okay.
been some spacing. Okay, so this is it. So we need to look at it, be aware of it, and get the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission next month. Unless anyone has any questions or comments right now. No? Okay,
Wait it out.
thank you. Pardon me?
Said wait it out.
Okay, that's what we're doing, we're waiting it out. Okay, thank you very much. So unless there are comments or questions, it'll be on next month's agenda. Okay, thank you both, thank you, Bill. Now we're going back up to the sewer ordinance, which has gone to full council, and council approved to advertise for a public hearing on this ordinance at our May council meeting. There was some discussion at the council meeting that we needed to at least look at it at legal. And I have to sort of apologize, Aaron, the remarks you made at the council meeting, you guys. Oh, come on in. Clarified a lot of things for me, so I appreciate that. Why don't you gentlemen get up in front of us instead of back there? Pull a chair if you need to, Louis, or whatever. Appreciate you all waiting to come in and do this. Like I say, we did see this at council. We will hold a public hearing at the May meeting. I'm going to turn it over to you, Louis, or to...
Aaron.
What is?
We have, I think, for the most part, we have subject matter experts here to talk about the substance
Right.
of it. I'm happy to introduce it again.
Would you please, very
and
quickly, yeah.
Just to
Thank
hit some
you.
of the highlights here. The genesis of this, we run a wastewater treatment facility and therefore are responsible for what water passes through. We kind of end up being the middleman on the regulation side, where we have end users that contribute water into our system, but we're still subject to regulation from EPA overall. So in order to protect ourselves, we have to enforce laws against the end users that are making any kind of contributions into our system. Because EPA wields that big stick, they kind of tell us what to do in terms of our regulations. So they had created the model ordinance, and they have been after us for a long time to adopt the model ordinance. The big changes, and Mr. Norton, please correct me if I'm wrong, primarily it is incorporating a lot of the regulations that have already been adopted that our ordinance refers to by reference. They prefer those to be incorporated within the document itself.
Okay.
So that's one of the big changes. I did include the model ordinance. You can see that our task in drafting this was to find the areas that were, number one, required, number two, find out whether or not they were already existed in our ordinance, and then number three, if they didn't, to fit that language back in. I will walk through this generally, and then I will leave any specific questions on any of these portions for you, so forgive me for moving quickly, but if there's anything more specific, it will probably have to be handed off to somebody else. Okay. The first section you see, I'm looking at the red line version. It's easier for me to refer to the changes. Beginning on page 66, you see the definition changes. Again, for the most part, this is just expanding some of the definitions that we already had, relying on some of the language that were in the regs, the CFR, the federal regulations, and then to expand that further within the text of our actual ordinance. Moving on, the next significant change that you'll see, and just to reiterate again, I am going to ask you to pass over the local limits. Those are established via laboratory testing in a separate process, so we're not asking those to be reviewed at this time. That's section 2662, page 74. There are red line changes, but that was based on my own neuroses. I was trying to fix some of the formatting errors on the ordinance itself. So there aren't any changes, it's just fixing formatting errors.
Okay.
Moving on then, page 79, you see section 2667.1 talks about hauled wastewater being dumped into any of our systems, and how they would be able to accomplish that. After that then is the accidental discharge plan. This is requiring any users that have a permit to create a plan for what happens if anything accidentally gets put in the system that should not be in the system. That way they've got it in file. This is a good place to mention our ordinance before left a lot of discretion to the director who was in charge of issuing these permits and in charge of ensuring reporting compliance. Because the director already takes a lot of the regulation from the EPA, many of these standards are already in place, and this does not represent a major change in the current practice. It just details what we're actually doing. So after that, it kind of hits the four major sections that we're going over. Number one is the reporting. That's begins on page 81. Permitting, which begins on page 81. what do you have to do in order to obtain a wastewater permit. After that, and it tells you what has to be within those permits. After that, you get into reporting requirements. So after you have received your permit, what do you then have to report in order to maintain that permit? This is one of my prime examples. If you look at the bottom of page 85, section 2673 was one paragraph that basically said, look at 40 CFR 403, that's what you have to do. Well, the model ordinance actually makes you spell it out. So it goes from one paragraph to several pages. This is the reporting requirements that you have to meet. Moving on from that, now that once you have the permit, now that you have to make reporting requirements, you are also subject to inspections. You have to determine what you're going to do to inspect, and then we also assert the power of our director has the ability to come on site and perform own independent inspections. That's on page 92. Then it gets into this is a change from what it had been previously as the enforcement. This begins on page 93. EPA was concerned with the lack of enforceability of our ordinance. They didn't know that what we had in place was adequate under their standards. Again, we have to be able to protect, we have to be able to adhere to EPA standards by forcing those below us in the chain of regulation to adhere to EPA standards. Otherwise, we ourselves could be liable as an entity. The enforcement provisions are, number one, it expands on the emergency suspensions and the injunctions that we can have. So what that says is, I'm skipping a page. First, emergency suspensions. We have the power to go in and shut off operations if you have a discharge and are not able to control it. Then we go into the 4 levels. Number 1, we have administrative penalties that we can issue. So that is within the organization ourselves. We can say you have created a violation of the terms of your permit. We may now charge you a daily fine. One part of doing it that way is we are only allowed to charge the fine and collect that. We can't get anything else. In order to get anything else, which is if you cause damage to our system and we have to make repairs, if you cause damage and it ended up in an interruption of service, those are called consequential damages, which are in addition to it. We can now go under the terms of this ordinance to a district court judge and say, not only did they violate the terms of their permit, but now they've caused this damage and we want that money back. Third thing would be to ask for an injunction. Not only can we have the emergency suspension, but then we can go to a district court judge and say, we're asking that you prohibit this activity under the power of the court in order to be able to force compliance. The fourth thing is to actually seek criminal penalties. If we believe that somebody is acting with the requisite state of mind where they have a criminal mind to violate, meaning they are intentionally violating the terms of their permit, we can now take them to court for a punishment of, you are doing this, you are causing the harm, you are meaning to cause the harm, and now we're seeking to have you punished for that. Final part, and this was a provision in the ordinance, but is another one that's expanded. We do an annual publication of anybody who is non-compliant with either their discharge permit or the terms created under the ordinance. That gives you kind of a broad overview, and to be frank, that is about to exhaust the extent to where I have any real knowledge and can speak on the terms of this. Anything more specific, and just to reiterate a point that we had made, I believe that there are 4 entities that are regulated under this. Okay. I'm sorry? We have a Superfund site, and we have 3 entities. That's right, okay. So Mr. Norton was saying that there's 1 Superfund site that is subject to regulation under this, and then 3 industries that are subject to regulation under this. We had provided, those industries have been made aware that this was coming. We have not heard anything from them still. And in large part, I think that that's attributed to the fact that the practical changes here in terms of what we're doing day to day are pretty minimal. With that, I would stand for any questions or encourage you to ask for any clarification from any of the subject matter experts.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Louis, did you have anything to add?
Madam Chairman, again, just here, this is an EPA mandate, and I find this very similar to when we're dealing with CDBG or New Mexico DOT or entities like that. They give us the boilerplate, and Aaron is tasked with marrying the two boilerplates together to put it together. Again, the limits and the chemistry has not been changed. We're just trying to comply with their ordinance template, is all this is.
Sure.
And I stand in solidarity with these guys.
Okay. Gentlemen, any comments from you? Appreciate you being here. I'm just curious, because you, of course, would know better than I, how often is the EPA subject to changing their regulations, and therefore, instead of just referring, you all now have to look at re-entering, I guess, specifics. I don't know how else to
Well,
say.
we report to EPA on a quarterly basis, monthly basis, and so when the permit comes out every 5 years, if there's any changes that they want us to make, they'll let us know then. And often when they inspect us every 2 years, and if anything's changing, they'll let us know then. They just come down and say, this is what we need, this is changing, and we do go to conferences for pre-treatment yearly, and they
Good.
let us know what's coming down the pipe
Good.
then, and they let us know ahead of time to be looking, what to look for and stuff like that. So we go to the conferences, we try to make it yearly, but
Good. Okay. Appreciate it. Go ahead, certainly, please.
The city of Roswell gets a permit for the wastewater treatment plant, which the pre-treatment department, we regulate their wastes to make sure they're in compliance with EPA standards too. And when we get these new permits, anything they want changed in it is based off laboratory analysis data that we have already sampled the water.
Oh.
And we also, 2 times a year, we'll sample the city of Roswell's water and the wastewater, and that's how we develop our local limits, those numerical values that are in the ordinance.
I see.
So it's based off lab data, and it's pretty good, airtight stuff.
Good. Thank
Okay.
you. Counselor Peterson.
Well, just, looking over the ordinance, it's pretty straightforward. Every city has to have this ordinance in New Mexico. And, there's nothing that they're trying to sneak in there or nothing like that. So, I looked over it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I, for one, appreciate all the effort that's put into this, and sorry that you had to come to one more presentation, but it helps me at least understand, and again, appreciate the effort that goes into all of this. Any other questions? Yes.
If I could just say, this was just so exciting reading it, I couldn't put it down. It was just, yeah, you were talking about the conference. That has to be one exciting thing y'all look forward to every year. Go hear about this stuff. But I do appreciate what you do. The only thing that I saw, and I feel silly even bringing it up, absolutely at all, but there's one "and" that is missing out of the first whereas. At the end of the first whereas, the word "and," and then that is it. That is it. I'm not going to question anything else. Y'all know what y'all are doing in the rest of this stuff, and I went through and read, can't say I understood a lot of this stuff, but
Right.
For sure, it's something that I agree with Councilor Peterson, that's a necessary thing that has to be moved forward. But just at the end of the NMSA 1978, comma, and the 3-27.3. And that's
Okay.
all.
Thank you. So what I'm sensing is that we appreciate the presentation and the further knowledge, but that we don't have any changes from the recommendation that came from full council, which was to hold a public hearing next month, right?
So there's no
So-
action needed from
No.
us today.
No, there isn't. Thank you, all.
Thank you for your support, councilors.
Of course, see you next month. Okay, again, we're skipping around, so I think now we're at the lodger's tax update, which is to advertise for a public hearing to vote on the ordinance on lodger's tax updates, which actually start on page 161.
I can,
Do they want, are they in here? Do
I
they
was going to
want-
say, I see them coming in, and
Oh, good.
I'll
Come on in, ladies.
do the introduction and then kind of throw it over
Perfect.
to them. This is state law has recently changed to allow us to collect lodger's tax from entities that have fewer, there used to be an exemption for entities that had fewer than 3 rooms. We can now change that, so that is what this ordinance accomplishes. I think that in terms of lodger's tax, I would expect Parker and Stephanie and Juanita can shepherd in the future several additional changes to try to tighten up our lodger's tax process. I know that we've got, and I'll have either of them speak on this, a company that we're partnering with to help ensure that we're actually collecting all of the lodger's tax that we're entitled to. And then I think also looking at some changes, additional changes to the ordinance in the future to make sure that we're capturing all of these small rental spaces, so.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon,
Hi,
Madam
ladies.
Chair and councilors. If you guys haven't met, this is Stephanie Mervine. She is our Special Events, Tourism, and Outreach Manager. And so the ordinance that you have, did you talk to them about the amended change to a January 1 date? So the ordinance that you guys see here will need an amendment. The state statute was SB 106. It went into effect as of January 1, where Airbnbs are now required to pay lodger's tax to municipalities. So I would ask you to make that change before going to council. This would be the first area of the ordinance that would allow us to collect revenues from that. And how we are going to track it, if you will, is partner with a company called Host Compliance. The Village of Ruidoso uses them. Santa Fe uses them. It alleviates costs for additional employees and staffing in our code enforcement department. And it also is another checks and balances to ensure that people are complying and submitting lodger's tax, and allows an audit, if you will, of those Airbnb properties. In the future, we would like to come back to you guys and include short-term rental properties. Now, when I say short-term rental properties, that does not include like an apartment that somebody would rent out to a citizen. It would be short-term rentals for leisure travel. So I have Stephanie here. She can add anything to, anything you'd like to say. And if you have any questions, we're more than happy to answer them.
Thank you. Go ahead, Stephanie.
I just wanted to add that we have had Host Compliance do one presentation to us, and he is reducing that, and we're going to do another one so he can discuss how he can help us with collecting the money, basically.
Good.
Tell them about the short-term, the Airbnbs for like tonight.
Oh, we did check, and there are 7 Airbnbs being sold for this evening, and we're
I'm
not.
sorry, say that again.
There are 7 Airbnbs available to purchase for this evening.
This evening, okay.
Yes, and then in the future, the short-term future, there's 24 that are selling,
And a total of 64 for the city.
and a total of 64 for the city.
So,
That's an additional 64 we are not collecting from
Correct.
right now.
Yes. Since January.
Go ahead.
How much is a host compliance gonna, how much they charge us?
It's a $10,000 contract. Based on
Is that yearly?
Yes,
it's
it
annual
is
contract.
annual contract. And it is based on the number of properties that you have available in your community. So the more properties you have, then your fees could potentially change. Currently, we have 64 properties that are renting out, not charging any lodger's tax. And so this ordinance really is to comply with state statute and start charging the 5% lodger's tax.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions, Councilor Perry?
My only question was, is the date that we're looking at in section 4 is what was needing to be changed?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, it changed to what?
It should be the usual language of this ordinance shall be effective 5 days after publication.
So
I
just
had-
take the July 1, 2020 out?
Correct. I had looked at there were some 2020 changes to the lodger's tax ordinance that we don't have here, and so luckily Juanita was able to catch that, so we can make
Okay.
the correction here.
So in accordance with state statute, this ordinance shall be effective after 5 days following its publication as required by law?
Right.
Okay.
So from what we have, we're just crossing out, I just crossed it out and I can't read it. As of July 1st. as
On
of
July 1st, 2020, and.
And we're
Yes.
crossing out, and, yes. Thank you.
Okay, so this is for advertisement as well.
Could I don't know if this is important or not, because again, I know the whereases are not, don't become part of the ordinance, but in the explanation, the second whereas says, the New Mexico legislature recently amended state statute in the 2020 legislative session, and the governor signed it into law, I think is further explanation. So I'd like to add in that second whereas, and the governor signed into law. Just to show it was actually completed and initiated, if that's okay with everyone. So, any further questions or comments? This should make the playing field level, is the way I
Yes.
look at it. And bring some more properties into the fold. Okay, so if there are no questions, with the changes of the second whereas and deleting the as of July 1st, 2020, and from section 4, is there a motion to recommend to council to do a public, advertise and do a public hearing?
I make a motion that we send a full council for the regular meeting in May for the approval to advertise this ordinance, amending Chapter 23 of the Roswell City Code relating to lodger's tax, as presented with the following additions and changes. At the end of the first whereas, the word "and" to be added. At the end of the second whereas, the wording "the governor signed into law, comma, and." And last change in section 4, strike the following words "on July 1, comma, 2020, and."
Okay, do I have a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second with those few changes to send the ordinance on relating to lodger's tax to full council, to advertise and have a public hearing. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries, and we will see this on the May council meeting.
Thank you.
Next
Have a good
is
night.
the resolution on the Keep Roswell Beautiful Board.
Good evening. I'd like to introduce you. This is Thalia Pantoja. She is our marketing coordinator and program coordinator for the Keep Roswell Beautiful program that we restarted this past year. She's been working diligently with Keep America Beautiful, and this resolution is part of the process to get us re-affiliated, as well as supports our opportunities to continue receiving grant funding from the state of New Mexico, Keep New Mexico True campaign. And so with that, I'll let her tell you a little bit about the candidates that had asked to be on the board. And if you have any questions, we're here to answer. This is her first time at a committee meeting, so be nice.
Juanita really explained a lot of it already. Having to set up a committee has entirely to do with staying in compliance with Keep America Beautiful, which allows us to have grant funding to actually run these types of programs. So we have been working through a lot of different programs that are going to be coming to fruition very soon. We want to make sure that we keep getting, money to do beautiful things in Roswell, and this is an easy way to do it. I've reached out to several different community members that are interested in serving on this board. We do have one vacancy as of right now that we haven't filled for the people that we will recommend, as long as you do approve this resolution. The people on this board range from all sorts of walks in Roswell. We have people associated with other that's what I'm looking for. We're other community activities and organizations within Roswell. We have some people that are just very concerned citizens that want to see kind of the best for the city and the best for this program. So it's going to be a community that really does represent Roswell in every facet of citizens living in the community, for sure. And I would entertain any questions you have for me.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments?
I guess I'm just a little confused, and there again, forgive me.
Yes, sir.
I'm very familiar with the Keep Roswell Beautiful. We worked with them significantly before, but I've been away from council for 2 years, so I'm not really sure where we are. When I was reading in the packet, I understood that this was a resolution to create the board. But,
Yes, sir.
but I had understood that you said that you already have some on the board, and you've got did I misunderstand that?
Yes, sir. So I don't have a board officially created. I have candidates that I will submit as people to consider to serve on this board. So I have already gathered names, letters of interest, as well as resumes that I will have submitted out once this board is actually created and it's become an entity that they can join. Does that make sense?
Okay, so at this time, there is no one.
No, sir.
Okay, just wanted to make sure and I had that clarification.
And Mr. Perry, so the letters of recommendation would go to Mayor Kintai for full consideration and go through that process as well.
So these would still be a nomination from the mayor, and then appointment by the mayor, and then confirmed through the council?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And I think that's all. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Probably of legal. Aren't most of our boards formed through ordinance? And aren't there certain processes which look like they've been duplicated here, but am I wrong that this is done by ordinance?
It is typically, we now have a new process, we've amended that section within the last 2 years to allow for creation by resolution, which allows for a creation of an organization by a resolution.
So is this also creating Keep Roswell Beautiful?
It's
As-
just, I'm sorry.
yeah, I guess as an entity, have we ever really said it's part of Roswell, it's an entity, or did it never quit?
So I believe, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, Keep Roswell Beautiful has been active and doing work.
Yes.
But now, in order to be part of the Keep America Beautiful under that umbrella, we actually have to have an official board. So what this does is creates the board to
Right.
continue the work that they've already been doing.
I'm not sure that answers my question, but I don't know how to ask it. No, it answered what I asked. I didn't ask right. there originally was a Keep Roswell Beautiful. That organization is no longer associated with the city. It's become Keep Chaves County
Correct.
Beautiful.
Correct.
So what has been done to specifically organize Keep Roswell Beautiful
So,
at this point?
At this point, so Ms. Pantoja's job description includes the program coordination for Keep Roswell Beautiful, which means that she will work with a group of volunteers, and she's gathered volunteers throughout the community to put programs on for the grant funding that we applied for. So last year, we applied for a new bus shelter. We got funding for, what else did we get?
We got funding for an art pop-up.
Oh, the art pop-up.
For promotional materials, for March Out the Trash, marketing materials, and then Big Belly trash cans. So I've already placed orders for those Big Belly trash cans to come in. There's actually going to be 2. We received enough grant funding to cover 2 of those, which we'll put on opposite districts within the city. And then other projects that we've done. So March Out the Trash actually got cut off short. Unfortunately, like we know the last 2 months. But we did do an art pop-up during the Science and Art Festival where we had volunteers do that and complete it and helped families actually do it. And we gave those families information on recycling and different ways to recycle within their community, and also the usage of plastic within the community. Another thing that we've done is the Clean It form. So we now are utilizing community service workers to identify and clean up those areas that citizens throughout Roswell have actually alerted us to. So there's a lot of different things that we've done with Keep Roswell Beautiful, but it was something that was revitalized last year, aside from the entity that it was before, if that makes sense. We're still in that first year of growth, and so we're just trying to get it up and running again.
And then the bottle cap project was the other one, and some zoo beautification. And we're in the process right now. Thalia's working on the current grant that is due just in a couple of weeks for next year's funding cycle. She also is the liaison between the state of New Mexico's Keep New Mexico True program, and she actually was just elected to be a board member on the statewide Keep New Mexico True Clean and Beautiful program to represent Southeast New Mexico. So we're very happy to have her and have the rejuvenation of this program within the city and part of the city. Last year we were awarded $25,000 or $24,000. We had only budgeted $14,000, and so we were happy to get more funding than what we were awarded, and was, you know, disappointed we had to turn away a little bit of money, but hopefully next year it'll be a little bit better.
Okay, I appreciate it. So just to sort of recap, you're looking at a 5-member board that serves 2-year terms, and you'll stagger the first one so it becomes staggered, and kind of a term limit of 2 consecutive years. And the mayor will appoint and council confirm the members
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
and their terms. And you don't see the need of a, I guess, a nonprofit or whatever to go along with what you're doing.
If they
You
want,
haven't.
if they wanted to participate, I think they are more than welcome. I know that the list of volunteers that she currently had was about, the very first meeting, we had maybe 8, and then we kind of put it out there. There's a new Facebook page. We got grant
good.
funding actually for an intern to do some videos, and so that individual is working on, they did the billboard advertisement for us, and the great thing is that the state paid their 50% of their salary, and they got credit at ENMUR for trying to educate our community on, you know, promoting this new program, getting people to volunteer in the community for beautification projects. So if a nonprofit wanted to be a part of Keep Roswell Beautiful, they are more than welcome to, because we would actually get, I think, more points in our volunteer hours on the grant when we apply.
Okay. But you, as the organizers right now, don't feel the need to have a nonprofit for people to donate to and that sort of thing? You're just doing it completely with the grant?
Yes, well, at this moment, that's how we're doing, but other projects that we've done that there wasn't money allocated within the grant funding, I actually went out and sought sponsors for those and donations. So example, in November, we had a Shop Small street sweep. So I had a group of volunteers, we cleaned up Main Street. Star Janitorial was actually kind enough to donate all of the materials that we used to clean up, and McDonald's donated breakfast for all of those folks that showed up to clean up. So that's something that I'm comfortable going out and doing versus actually gathering donations. I think that the program is so new right now. People are going to be less willing to actually donate to it until we've established ourselves and established the work that we do.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Can I have a motion on this?
Make a motion that we send to full council in the regular May meeting for the recommendation is to approve the resolution creating a Keep Roswell Beautiful Community Board.
Is there a second? Okay, any further discussion or comments, questions? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. It'll be on the council agenda in June. Thank you.
Thank you.
For what you're doing.
Have a great evening.
Joe, we're finally at Roar. I have to say, just from what I understand, just from brief conversation, that you've been working on this project for quite some time. And I personally am glad you're in Roswell when you actually rolled it out.
Thank you. And I don't have any of the information in front of me, so I will
That's
walk through
fine.
it, but
We're on, just for edification, or just knowledge, I guess, we're on page 168 of the packet.
And we had been working, like Councilor Stubbs mentions, we've been working on this for a little while, trying to find other ways that we can help support our businesses in the city in a lot of different ways. When we started looking at this whole project, it was to help existing buildings improve their fire suppression, ADA accessibility, and all of that. So when I started talking with the EDC and Mike Spiritu about this program, because those are very expensive systems, and that's why some of our old buildings have become very hard to renovate. So when we established this, we piggybacked this concept on top of their facade grant program through the EDC. So they have a facade grant of up to $10,000 in order to improve the outside, the facial stuff on that. But we believe that no matter how pretty you make it, if it can't be functional on the inside, then there's a situation with it. As of the pandemic that we are facing right now and the conditions that the businesses are finding, I think this revolving loan program becomes even more important to our community as an opportunity to receive some gap financing through what they can get through a conventional bank and where the city can kind of help with that. So this is a low-interest loan program called Roswell Opportunity Advancement Revolving Fund. It is actually utilizing dollars that the city has from an old community development revolving loan program. And we have about $1.2 million sitting in that fund that has been sitting there for a while, and we would like to put that money to work in trying to do low-interest loans for our businesses to help take on these expensive renovation projects. And so I guess the object of this thing is that we would actually operate it through the EDC. They would do all the legwork of making sure that the information is there. You can see within the program, there's a lot of detail in there as to eligibility and the process to help protect the city's investment. But the intent is to let the EDC essentially broker the process, and then they can help our businesses do this type of work. What we're suggesting right now is to seed that project with, I believe, $150,000 and let them start working with that capital within the plan. If there is a request from a business owner that doesn't meet exactly what the eligibility is, but it makes good sense to help that business survive or operate in a better fashion. This also provides the EDC the ability to come in and talk to the city council about changing some of the guidelines for that on a case-by-case basis from the city council's decision. And so I think this matches up to a lot of different things. I know we're looking at, potential assistance from the federal, potential assistance from the state, but this is our opportunity. It matches up to some of the other cities out there that are doing the revolving loan programs to assist our small businesses in our community. And so I recommend that. I'm open for any questions from that.
Are there questions? Yeah, go ahead.
No questions. I think this is a great idea.
Thank you.
I think it's going to help a lot of businesses out. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Perry?
No, I'm very appreciative. Everything is fine. I would just say I'm just one there again on consistency. So in some of the whereases, there's and, some there not, and I know that's been my theme this today for some reason, but if we can just add ands at the end of the whereases, that's what it's a continuous run on, and to keep it consistent, if we could do that. But no, this is wonderful, thank you.
Okay. Wonderful. I'm assuming from what you just said that the EDC is in agreement with what you
Yes, and I should add that the EDC is supportive. I've asked for more of them to help share that support, so you hear from some of the board members and everything, but we believe that this is at least that one way that we can help through some of the challenges of our small business people. So.
And so we're talking about reestablishing the revolving fund. Whatever happened to that old one? Did we end up, the 1.2, forgive me, I vaguely remember and I can't remember the details.
Yeah.
The 1.2 that we had has just been set aside for what I believe this is a similar activity.
It is a similar action to that, and I'm not sure exactly what that program entirely looked like, but I know we went through a couple different renditions of revolving loans over the years, and I think some of them were tied to one of the resurgent businesses out at the Air Center at one point in time, and so this money just kind of sat there. The UDAG money was the money that I believe out at the Air Center. So
that's what I'm referring
and the UDAG money, they stopped the program years ago, and the remainder of that money sits in a fund.
Right.
So this is similar money. This is not this is not that UDAG money, but this is what was called Community Development Revolving Loan Fund.
Okay.
And so it's very similar situation. I think that there was an effort to utilize this money to do exactly what we're trying to do. And so this is kind of that renewal of, let's put this money back to work. So.
Great. So we're proposing this as a resolution. Any
Is that correct?
questions specifically to it? Okay. I appreciate the work that's been done on this too, and the thoughtfulness that has gone into the process.
Thank you.
Yes. Can I have a motion?
Make a motion, we send to full council for the regular May meeting, for recommendation of approval of resolution establishing Roswell Opportunity Advance Revolving Fund.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to send the resolution on the revolving loans fund to full council. Is this also consent?
I mean, it does have the possibility to be consent, but I would imagine this is something we'd kind of like to tout.
That's what I'm thinking.
I would appreciate
I'd like
that.
this to be on the regular agenda. I think that the
Okay,
citizens ought
yeah,
to be able to hear
I
on
wanted
this.
to distinguish, so yes, thank you. Okay, so this will be on the full council agenda for the May council meeting with a recommendation to approve? Mr. Perry? With a recommendation to approve?
To approve.
Okay. So, motion basically to, oh, thank you. To send to full council on the regular agenda for the May City Council meeting, a resolution establishing the Roswell Opportunity and Advancement Revolving Fund with our recommendation to approve. Sorry. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. It will be on the
Yes,
agenda
ma'am.
of the regular
Thank you.
council meeting. I'm sorry, I'm getting tired. Okay, now, thank you. We flipped the page to number 8 very quickly, which is the meeting time and dates. We've been meeting on the 4th, Thursday at 4 o'clock. I would note that we previously said that in November and December it would be the 3rd Thursday because the 4th is, I think one of them is Thanksgiving and the other is Christmas Eve or something. So does anyone have a problem with continuing with that process?
Do we not, and if we don't, I'm not, I have the ability, I'm flexible. But do we have the ability, I don't know the ability of the other committee members, of meeting any earlier in the day? It's already 6 o'clock, and we have staff that's been here significantly over their normal working day. I just wonder if that's a possibility, but I'm not contentious on that. I can do whatever.
Councilor Peterson? What would you, keep it at 4 on Thursday? Okay. And I think Councilor Foster can't really meet any earlier than that.
And that's fine. I just did not know for sure. I don't know everybody's working schedule. I know I work for a living too, but I have the flexibility. But so just wanted to make sure and see where we were. Okay. Oh, no. No problem.
I wish I were working for a living. Okay, so then if everyone kind of concurs, we'll keep that 4th Thursday at 4 o'clock, except for November and December will be the 3rd Thursday. We'll continue to do that. We have our department reports attached. I appreciate getting these. I don't know what I did with them. Oh, they're there. Are there any questions or comments on either the Air Center, City Clerk, Human Resources, Legal, Planning and Zoning, or Safety?
And committee, just for, I mean, my final 2 cents, whatever.
This is your.
The plan would be, or had been, to have a department head provide a report, an oral report.
Yes.
Hopefully, whenever we can get things back to normal and we can sit closer to each other, we can
Yes.
get back to that. And then if at any time that we've made the offer again, and we'll probably need to, well, maybe Parker can take up discussions again, but the municipal court would also come to this committee if they ever chose to make reports to
Okay.
the committee.
Okay. We appreciate it. I appreciate this. There's no further business, and I don't think any public comment.
Any last words of wisdom?
From, I guess everyone is aware that this actually is Aaron's last
This is it.
hurrah, yes.
Whenever you adjourn the meeting, I'm not the city
He
attorney
just does
anymore.
not look too upset about that. I don't know.
I said no.
Well, I, for one, truly appreciate all the work that you've done. I appreciate us becoming friends as well.
Yes.
And I'm so happy to know that Parker, who has been working very closely with us already, is going to be our interim, and so appreciate that. And for me, at least, good luck
Thank you.
on your new adventure.
Thank you. feel very blessed to have gotten to work with all of you, and I just thank you for letting me do that, and be nice to Parker.
Now, what year did you come to us?
2016.
Okay. I knew I'd worked at least a couple of years with you
Mhm.
before, and I guess he thought maybe I'd win this election, so he went, no, I'm just kidding. Well, you will be missed.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Any further comments? Okay, we are adjourned then at 6:09. Thank you all very much.